Imagine this: the Eye of Horus, the coiled serpent, the Tree of Life, the golden ratio spiral, the ancient pyramid, all glowing, spinning, converging around a radiant axis of light, until they merge into one single symbol, a symbol not found in any ancient book, because T was never meant to be read. It was meant to be remembered, and now it remembers you. Throughout this entire series, we've explored the hidden sciences of ancient civilizations. We've followed the trail of sound, light, number, and symbol. We've uncovered secrets buried beneath stone, behind scripture, and inside the soul. But none of these were isolated truths. Alchemy, reincarnation, the geometry of the cosmos, they were never separate. They were pieces of a much larger puzzle. A map designed to lead you back to yourself. Because the greatest secret of esoteric knowledge isn't just what it reveals. It's what it restores. So why was this knowledge fragmented? Why hidden in myths, rituals, and encoded glyphs across the world? And what happens when we put the pieces back together? This final episode is the convergence point, where all teachings meet, where forgotten memory is reborn, where the light returns to its source, and the source is you. Part 1. The Esoteric Blueprint of Reality. What if everything you've ever read in the ancient texts wasn't just metaphor, but blueprint? From the golden spirals carved into temples, to the sacred names whispered in rituals, to the mandalas, yantras, sephirot, and sound chants passed down for millennia. They weren't random. They weren't symbolic poetry. They were codes, architectural blueprints of reality itself. Every esoteric tradition, from Kabbalah to Hermetica, from Vedic scriptures to Egyptian cosmology, described the universe not as chaos, but as a living, breathing structure. A sacred geometry built on vibration, frequency, and divine intelligence. Let's start with the Tree of Life in Kabbalah. 10 emanations, each a layer of creation, mapped in descending order. From pure light to matter to you. Compare that to the flower of life found across ancient Egypt, India, and China. A pattern of overlapping circles containing every platonic solid, every frequency, every possible form of creation. Zoom in even closer, into the DNA spiral. And what do you see? A geometry that echoes the Fibonacci sequence, vibrating like a sacred chant, translating light into form. Even the sounds of the universe, Om in Vedic texts, YHVH in Hebrew, or the primal word in the Gospel of John, were believed to be the original tones of creation. Sound equals form, vibration equals structure. And when you put it all together, it becomes clear the ancients weren't guessing. They were mapping. They saw the universe as a living intelligence, a multidimensional field of energy where thought, symbol, and sound could bend the very fabric of reality. In their temples, these teachings were carved into stone. In their chants, encoded into vibration. In their rituals, embodied through movement, color, and sacred proportion. Each tradition left behind a piece of the same map. A way to navigate back to source, not by following dogma, but by tuning into the structure behind all things. And here's the most astonishing part. That map isn't outside of you. It's inside, in your breath, in your heartbeat, in the geometric rhythm of your cells. The ancient blueprint is your blueprint. But if it's so central, so vital to who we are, why don't we remember it? Because something happened. Something shattered the whole, divided the map, scattered the knowledge into isolated cultures, myths, and secret schools. So in the next part, we explore that great fracturing, how humanity lost the thread of unity, and why the truth was hidden in fragments. Because to truly understand the whole, we must first remember how it was broken. Part 2. The fragmentation, how sacred knowledge was broken. Once, all sacred knowledge pulsed like a single song. Vibration, symbol, structure, soul, moving as one. There was a time when all knowledge was whole. The stars, the breath, the stone temples, the sacred chants. They all spoke the same language, a language of vibration, proportion, and unity. But then, something shattered. After what many traditions remember as the Great Flood, a veil fell upon humanity. Civilizations like Atlantis, Lemuria, and Zep Tepi vanished or buried beneath waves and dust. The blueprint was scattered. Where once there had been unity, now there were pieces. As new religions rose from the ashes, they brought with them glimpses of truth. But also walls. The open mystery schools became closed temples. The sacred geometry of creation became pagan idolatry. The chants of activation became blasphemy. And the divine feminine, intuition, inner gnosis, the lunar current, was silenced. The one song of the universe became 1,000 broken dialects. Symbol was divorced from meaning. Sound was cut from structure. Geometry was stripped of soul. Knowledge became power, to be controlled, hoarded, weaponized. In ancient Egypt, priesthoods kept the rites behind locked doors. In medieval Europe, the church burned those who remembered the old ways. In colonial conquests, indigenous wisdom was labeled as superstition and erased. Each time humanity reached for the light, someone came to sever the thread. But the knowledge never truly disappeared. It went underground, into the scrolls of the Essenes, into the glyphs of the Mayan codices, into the secret vaults of the Vatican, into the symbols carved into cathedrals and Masonic temples, and most importantly, into the subconscious mind of humanity. It lived on in dreams, in sacred art, in déjà vu, in the inexplicable pull you feel towards something ancient, something you can't quite name, but somehow remember. Because here is the consequence of the fragmentation. Humanity forgot that it is divine, forgot that it is not separate from creation, but a co-creator of it. We became disconnected from our power, from the source, from ourselves. And yet, there is a reason this knowledge is resurfacing now, why the sacred geometry is appearing again in modern design, why the tree of life is being studied by neuroscientists, why sound therapy and vibration are re-emerging in healing, because the time of forgetting is ending. So how do we begin to remember? How do we take the shattered pieces and make them whole again? The answer is not outside you. It never was. In the next part, we'll journey inward, into the inner temple where all ancient paths converge, because the way forward is the way within. Part 3. The inner temple, where all paths converge. What if the place you've been searching for was never somewhere to travel to, but something to awaken within? For thousands of years, seekers have crossed deserts, climbed mountains, entered cathedrals and pyramids, all to find the divine. But every true esoteric tradition eventually whispers the same truth. You are the temple, and when you close your eyes, you find it, not as a place, but as a pulse. From the mystery schools of Egypt to the Gnostic teachings of early Christianity, to the yogic sciences of the East. The message is clear: all sacred knowledge is encoded within you. The tree of life in Kabbalah, that's your nervous system. The 7 chakras, your emotional alchemy. The eye of Horus, your awakened pineal gland, your inner vision. The pyramid, a symbol of the human spine ascending towards spiritual light. You are the mirror of the cosmos. The geometry of galaxies echoes in your cells. The resonance of mantras vibrates in your bones. The sacred proportions of temples were not built for gods in the sky, but for the God form dormant in you. Every ancient ritual, every mantra, every sacred symbol was designed to activate your inner structure, to remind you that the path was never about belief. It was about transformation. Because awakening does not come from collecting more knowledge. It comes from living the knowledge. When you breathe with awareness, you are chanting the original OM. When you sit in silence, you are entering the sanctum of your inner shrine. When your thoughts align with your words, and your words align with your actions, you begin to radiate coherence. This coherence is the temple, and once it is built, you no longer search for signs, you become the sign. This is why all paths converge, not in dogma, but in direct experience. The Sufi spins, the Kabbalist climbs the tree. The yogi activates the serpent within. The Gnostic prays not to escape the world, but to remember their origin beyond it. Each one is returning to the same center, the inner axis, the still point from which all wisdom radiates. And this is the secret behind every esoteric tradition. As above, so below, as within, so without. The source is not far away. It pulses in every breath, in every beat of your heart, in the space between thoughts. But you must enter the temple with reverence, not just through knowledge, but through presence. In the next part, we'll see what happens when humanity begins to rebuild this inner temple and reconnects with the source field. Because when the temple within is activated, the wisdom of the ancients begins to awaken across the earth, not as myth, but as living memory. Part 4. The Great Remembering and Return of Esoteric Wisdom. For centuries, it was hidden, suppressed, scattered into fragments across time and space. But now, it's returning. Across the world, people are waking up. Not just intellectually, but energetically. In meditation, they begin to see symbols they've never studied, yet somehow recognize. In dreams, they visit temples they've never entered, yet feel like home. In silence, they hear frequencies, not from outside, but from deep within. This is not coincidence. This is the great remembering. The esoteric wisdom once lost is rising again. Through quantum physics, neuroscience, ancient DNA, and consciousness research. Science now confirms what mystics have whispered for millennia. The universe is made of vibration. Thoughts affect matter. Observation collapses possibility into form. And every being is entangled in a vast field of intelligence, what the ancients called the Akashic records. Modern scientists call the zero-point field. What sages called the pineal gate, today we call the third eye's electromagnetic lens. Language has changed, but the essence remains. Even in technology, we're building simulations of spiritual truth, virtual reality, neural interfaces, artificial intelligence. These are echoes of what consciousness has always been capable of. Without machines, symbols once dismissed as superstition are being studied again as gateways into the subconscious mind. Sacred geometry is returning to architecture. Mantras are being measured in healing frequencies. The spiral, the eye, the serpent. They're no longer just ancient icons. They're alive. Because we're not discovering them, we're remembering them. They were encoded into our biology, into our dreams, into the quiet, knowing that there is more. And we've lived it before. You are not learning something new. You are retrieving what your soul has always known, and you're not alone. This remembering is collective. It's moving through the collective nervous system of humanity. We feel it in art, in synchronicities, in the urge to simplify, to return to the essential, to reconnect with something real. And this wave of remembering is not passive. It is transformational. Because once you remember the blueprint, you can begin to live it. And that leads us to the final step in this journey, not just knowing the truth, but embodying it. In the next part, we'll explore what it means to truly live the esoteric knowledge in everyday life. Not as mysticism, but as a way of being. Because remembering is the first step, but living the truth. That's how we become the temple reborn. Part 5. Living the Esoteric Truth. Esoteric knowledge was never meant to be admired from afar. It was meant to be embodied. The ancients did not carve sacred geometry into stone so we could theorize about it. They carved it to remind us that every action, every breath, every moment is part of the divine pattern. This knowledge was not for priests alone. It was for the human being fully alive, the mystic in motion, the philosopher who feels, the alchemist who lives. Because once you remember the blueprint, you can begin to become it. Your body becomes the temple. Your breath becomes the chant. Your thoughts become the frequency you transmit. Drinking water with awareness becomes a ritual. Sitting with a friend becomes ceremony. Even silence becomes sacred. Eating becomes sacred. Speaking becomes ritual. Walking becomes meditation. Loving becomes a form of high magic. This is the true purpose of esoteric knowledge, not to escape reality, but to sanctify it, to turn the mundane into the miraculous, to recognize that your life is the altar and your choices are the offerings you place upon it. When you begin to live like this, you don't wait for miracles. You become one. You don't seek the divine in distant dimensions. You carry it into this one, because you are not just learning symbols. You are the symbol. You are the spiral, the flame, the eye, the pyramid. You are the sacred sound, taking shape in human form. And when enough people remember this, when enough souls begin to live this, the world begins to shift. Not through revolution, but through resonance. Imagine a world where architecture heals, where schools teach geometry of the soul, where conversation vibrates with intention, where every human is recognized as a temple of consciousness. This is not utopia. This is what happens when the sacred becomes lived reality. The earth becomes an altar. Humanity becomes a choir. Reality becomes a sacred ceremony, and it begins with you. One conscious breath, one aligned action, one moment of choosing coherence over chaos, because now we've come full circle, from the forgotten temples of the ancients to the rising inner temple within you, from lost symbols to living symbols, from fragmented knowledge to the rebirth of sacred living. So what comes next? That depends on what you choose to carry forward. Because this series was never just a series, it was an initiation, a remembering, a returning, and now, a becoming. Final CTA. the end of forgetting, the beginning of becoming. You've walked through 60 gateways of forgotten truth. You've decoded the hidden. You've remembered the ancient. You've looked into the mirror of the soul and seen the symbols staring back from within. But this isn't the end. This is the threshold. Because esoteric knowledge was never meant to be worshipped, it was meant to be lived. The scrolls are closing, the temples are silent, the myths have all been told. Now the question is, will you become the myth reborn? Will you carry the frequency forward? You are the final scroll. You are the living temple. You are the return of sacred memory. This was never about watching, it was about remembering. And now, it's your turn to become the myth. This series was not content, it was a ceremony, and if you feel that something ancient has awakened within you, then the work begins now. Not to seek more, but to become more. Because the great truth has never changed. As within, so without. As above, so below. As you remember, so the world is reborn. The time of forgetting has ended. The time of embodiment begins. See you in the next creation.